I don't know if you're worrying about this, Venters, but I know a lot of people are starting to think a little bit more about their finances, especially now that we've had this stock market plunge combined with all these federal employees that have been laid off, right, or have been forced to resign. And what we're left with is a situation where all of a sudden things are getting way more expensive. They're already high, but they're going to be getting even more expensive, right? Because everything that comes in that's imported is going to probably be anywhere from 10 to 25% more pricey going forward. So with that being said, I was watching a video by a guy named Levi. His channel is Tip You in the App. He's an actual Uber driver. He does it for a living. And I think he works for both Uber and Lyft, or they work for him, depending on how you look at independent contracting. Anyway, he was kind of making a strategy about what he is going to do going forward with the knowledge that more than likely things are going to get a little bit more pricey. And he took it kind of deep. I was really appreciative of this video that he made because he was talking about the fact that, hey, out of all these tens of thousands of employees that are being laid off, and it's probably hundreds of thousands all around the country, right? Many of them, in a bid to make some sort of cash flow, are probably going to start relying on gig work. In other words, he and his handful of Uber and Lyft drivers that do it full time for a living are all of a sudden going to have to deal with these people that do it part-time just to make a couple bucks. And that's kind of challenging. Could you imagine if all of a sudden you went from having a consistent flow of customers to all of a sudden you're sharing those customers with every Tom, Dick, Harry, and Nancy that decide to become a gig worker? So there's challenges there. Also, with everything getting expensive, it means that if you need to replace the tires on your vehicle, which I assume a lot of Uber drivers probably have to do more regularly than you and I would. Well, now they're going to have to worry about replacing those at a higher clip, which means that more than likely the app itself and the cost of an Uber drive or ride is going to probably go up too. You have all these people that are unemployed, they're probably going to have to ditch the Uber ride for the bus. If they use the Uber for their way of getting to and from work, however, the bus might not be an option because you know as well as I do, it takes forever to get anywhere on a bus. And some people are just going to actually swallow the extra cost so they can get to work. So he had all these things going through his mind. And I'm sure if you and I wanted to come up with a list, we could come up with an endless list. Now, the reason I appreciated this video so much is because a lot of people that are going to start going broke slowly but surely over the next year or two are going to be thinking that something like Uber and Lyft might save them. But in reality, all you're going to do is enter a pool of workers that's endless. Imagine if every time someone needs a ride, there's not one Uber driver or Lyft driver there for them. Imagine there's 15 or 20 people. There's a chance you might not have anyone to pick up. And then when you do pick them up, there's probably a chance going forward that instead of leaving a $5, $6, $7 tip or whatever they averagely do, there's probably a good chance you're going to start seeing people that only leave $2 or $3 tips, maybe even less, who knows? Now, you can take those same Uber and Lyft thoughts and ideas over to Grubhub and DoorDash as well. People are going to quit using these apps for the luxury of getting something delivered to them, and instead they're going to start getting in their car or taking a walk and actually getting their food themselves, like we used to do back in the day. Then if you break down fast food, there's a chance that people are going to have to actually, hey, how's it going? People are going to actually have to learn how to use that thing in their kitchen referred to as the stove and the oven and the microwave. Now, this is where we have an advantage if you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. We actually grew up where we did actually make foods. We didn't actually go to eat fast food all the time. And I say that half-heartedly because I know in my heart that a lot of younger people have been eating and making food in the kitchen as well. I know you guys don't eat just fast food, but for those of you that are addicted to fast food, you're gonna have to watch some YouTube and TikTok videos on how to start creating your own food that you make yourself. Now, Levi had some ideas that I thought made sense. His idea was to baby your car if you're already an Uber and Lyft driver. Don't drive your car into the ground, because what are the odds you're going to be able to replace that car nearly as easily in the future, especially if all these variables kick in? If all of a sudden you have less clients, less tips, you might not be an Uber or Lyft driver very much longer. You're gonna need that car whether you continue in that career or not. So you gotta learn how to baby it. Well, what do you mean by baby it, Jesse? You can't baby a machine. You can keep up on its maintenance, get its oil changes, get its tune-ups whenever it's needed, right? Change out the tires, stay on top of all the fluids. Don't run that car into the ground to the point where it dies. Keep that car alive and running as long as possible. I haven't heard the numbers on this, but I remember once upon a time, the average person would only keep a car for about 5 to 7 years before they turned it in or whatever, sold it. Now I'd be willing to bet that that number is probably up there around year 10. People are probably holding on to vehicles a little bit longer. I have one car that's a 1999. Can you guys beat that? I bet you a couple of you have some cars that are older like that. They might not necessarily be your number one car, but they might be your second car that you hold just for, you know, occasions where your first car is out of commission. If you have an older car, let me know down below. By the way, I love it when you guys leave comments. When you leave comments, it really lets the algorithm know that, hey, this is a video worth sharing. If you guys don't mind, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already, and definitely leave a comment, because you don't have to necessarily be a gig worker to wonder what the immediate future holds for us all. One of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take a look at places where I'm leaking money, where money's kind of going through the holes in my pocket, so to speak. One of the things that I like snacking on is Skinny Pop, which is basically just expensive popcorn, right? You buy a bag and it's $3 or $4, sometimes $5 a bag, depending on how big the bag is, right? But if I buy the kernels and make it myself, it's probably 1/3 or 1/4 the price. It's probably a heck of a lot cheaper. So what your boy decided to do this weekend was I decided to invest in some popcorn kernels, and I even invested in some of those little shaker flavorings that they have. So instead of eating Doritos and ice cream, I'm gonna try to snack on popcorn as much as I possibly can. And because it's so inexpensive and it's such a treat, because we all love popcorn, because of our movie obsession we grew up with, I would recommend you buy some popcorn kernels the next time you go to the grocery store as well. Every time I see a diesel truck, I always think, is there a woman in there being held captive against her will? No, just kidding, just kidding. Guys, in addition to buying popcorn, I also started imagining that last year it didn't rain very much, and when it did, I had to make some of my walks a little bit quicker. So what I decided to do was, I was on Amazon buying the popcorn, right? And I decided I'm gonna go ahead and buy one of these inexpensive walking pads. If you're not familiar with what a walking pad is, think of a treadmill machine at Planet Fitness, right? But instead of buying some gigantic $1,500 treadmill, it was about $100. So my goal is that even if it's absolutely pouring, because keep in mind, here in Arizona, it rains more during the hottest part of the year, the summer, because that's when we get our summer monsoons. And I have a feeling, since it didn't rain very much last year, that more than likely it's going to even out and rain quite a bit this year. So if I can still do my videos, but from my house on my walking pad, then that might be an awesome thing. And if I end up telling you after I purchase it that, hey, I'm glad I did, then maybe that can be something you guys can look into as well. Now, I know you're thinking, Jesse, I thought we were talking about saving money and roughing it. Well, you know what? I think I like walking enough that I'm willing to invest $100 now before those prices go up tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? If you've been thinking about buying a pair of shoes or buying some sort of gym equipment, remember, darn near everything comes from another country. Maybe purchase it now rather than tomorrow. Now, that doesn't mean Jesse is recommending you go on a shopping spree, although that would be fun and that would probably relieve some of the stress you're under, but it would also add some more stress on the back end if you end up buying it on a credit card. What I'm saying is, if there's some of those things that you were contemplating buying anyway, you might want to buy them sooner rather than later. I hope that makes sense. Spawny says, expensive cars equal expensive Ubers. Maybe we'll all lose weight now as we'll be walking and biking more. The reason that he said that was because Levi, the creator, was mentioning the idea that, hey, every time you need to get an oil change on your vehicle, it's probably going to be a couple bucks more. When you need to change your tires, which already cost an arm and a leg, it seems like a lot of vehicles have computer traction and stuff. And I know I'm saying this wrong, but if one of your tires is not equal with the others, a lot of times they recommend that you replace all four. Now, I'm not saying that that's my game plan, but I know a lot of people out there will do whatever their mechanic or their tire guy recommends. So my thinking is, it might be a good idea to baby the car. Make sure you stay on top of your oil changes. Make sure you stay on top of all these necessary things. Well, Jesse, that doesn't make sense. How's that going to save money if you're spending all this money? My thinking is preventative maintenance. If you stay on top of things, right, then hopefully you can avoid those bad pitfalls. I had a buddy back right after we got out of high school. He had a vehicle, and this was no joke. He opened the cap one day to see what was in the engine, where you put the oil, and there was this sludge. It looked like straight up thick tar from the La Brea pits, right? It just looked really, really tarry. And I go, don't you ever get oil changes? And he literally did not know what I was talking about. And I was explaining to him that, and keep in mind, this is back in the day. I was like, well, I think every 4,000 miles, you're supposed to change your oil out. And he goes, oh, well, occasionally I'll put some oil in it because I noticed it's a little low, like he had experimented with stuff. But he didn't realize you got to get rid of that old stuff and replace it with the new. Anyway, long story short, this guy ended up basically destroying his vehicle, and it wasn't super duper old. It was an older car, but it's one of those cars that if he would have babied it, taken it to an actual mechanic that knew what he or she was doing, he might have been able to get serviceable years out of that car for many more years to come. Hopefully Uber and Lyft drivers know enough to say, hey, this is my business, being a taxi for people. I'm going to stay on top of maintenance for my car, but you never know. Greg Sprinkle says, what's the word tip you speak of? Poor economy equals less tips. Hey guys, how are you?
Good morning, man. How are you?
So that's another scary thing too. When Uber and Lyft drivers take me somewhere, because believe it or not, every once in a blue moon, I do use Uber and Lyft, I routinely give them like a $5 or $6 tip just for going down the street. But that's because I use it once in a blue moon. If I used it all the time, and if all of a sudden I was doing it now with how expensive things are, God, I might try to go with a $3 tip. Who knows? And I'm sure there's people right now that probably think, God, I can't leave much more than $1 or $2. So again, I have a feeling that even gig employees going forward are going to have to learn how to survive with higher costs and lower funds. That's a scary combination. New_OG says, it's not an exciting topic, but it is reality. Staying aware of the current events may mean adding a new gig app. Be blessed. Now that was somebody that I think when they were leaving the comment, they're not an Uber or Lyft driver, but I think that's their way of saying, hey, if worse comes to worst, I'm going to download one of those apps so I could potentially earn some extra money. If you're a full-time gig worker and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of people that are joining Uber and Lyft as drivers, you're going to make less money. But those people that are out there making zero money, this is going to give them an opportunity to at least get a couple dollars rolling in. Oh my God, it's going to be miserable for everybody involved. Conservative Watch Party says the less people buying cars, the more people ordering Ubers. This is what makes predicting so much fun. You never know how it's going to be. This could create a situation where, because cars are so expensive, new college grads that are getting their first job might just decide, hey, I can't afford to lease or buy a car. I'm just going to go the Uber and Lyft route. And if they end up going the Uber and Lyft route, then that means current Uber and Lyft drivers might be able to make a lot of money. Again, I stress the word might. The one thing that he didn't really talk about, but it's probably true, if you're taking an Uber every day for 10 or 15 bucks and you're broke enough, you're gonna eventually think about breaking down and taking the bus. Am I right? I believe here in Arizona you can get a month-long bus pass for like 50 or 60 bucks. It might be a couple bucks more now, but I want you guys to think about this. If you're a student, or if you're somebody that's new to the workforce and you don't have a car payment, but you know that you can get a bus pass for 60 bucks a month, and it's gonna cover every single bus ride you need, even if you need multiple bus rides a day, how can you beat those prices? It's gonna be one of those futures where nobody owns anything, but everybody learns to love it. Anyway, have a beautiful day. Love your walk. You might be walking more in the future, especially if your car breaks down. Have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow.